He opens his eyes to smoke. The world spins, blurred and wrong. Metal groans somewhere above him. His leg screams with pain he can't yet place. The taste of blood fills his mouth, copper and thick. Through the cracked canopy, tree branches claw at gray sky. The instruments are dead. The cockpit reeks of aviation fuel, bitter and chemical, mixing with the acrid smell of burning wiring. His ears ring so loud he can't hear his own breathing. He tries to move and fire shoots through his shin. Something is broken. Something is very wrong. He fumbles for the radio switch, fingers trembling, slick with something warm. Static. Then nothing. The radio is dead. He's behind enemy lines. No communication, no rescue beacon, just him, a shattered aircraft, and the certainty that enemy patrols are already moving toward the smoke column rising from his crash site. The sun is dying. Maybe 3 hours of light left. How do you stay alive when you have no food, no radio, and the enemy is already hunting your wreck? He stares at the twisted metal around him, at the scattered components, at his own bloodied hands. An impossible idea forms. What if he could build a radio from nothing? What if desperation could become invention? But night is coming fast. The patrols are coming faster. If he fails before dawn, the forest won't be his grave. It'll be his prison. This is the story of how one downed pilot, isolated deep behind enemy lines with severe injuries and no hope of rescue, used raw ingenuity, psychological endurance, and a miracle of timing to build a makeshift radio from wreckage and call for help moments before enemy forces closed in. You'll follow every beat of his desperate race against time, the engineering improvisation that defied logic, the mental collapse that nearly destroyed him, and the last-second rescue that almost never happened. Every minute escalates. Every choice matters. This is survival at its most impossible. The mission was supposed to be routine, a reconnaissance flight over occupied territory, photographing enemy positions for the planners back at command. Lieutenant James Brennan, 26 years old, mechanical engineer before the war, pilot by necessity. He'd flown this route twice before. The weather was clear. The intelligence said minimal anti-aircraft presence in the sector. Intelligence was wrong. The flak came without warning, black bursts blooming around his P-51 Mustang like deadly flowers. The first shell punched through the left wing, shredding control cables. The second tore into the engine cowling. Oil pressure dropped to 0. Temperature spiked into the red. The engine coughed, stuttered, then seized with a grinding scream that he felt through the stick. He tried to gain altitude, tried to turn back toward friendly lines, but the aircraft was already dying. The nose dropped. The controls went sluggish, then useless. He fought the stick with everything he had, but physics doesn't negotiate. The trees came up fast, a green wall rushing to meet him. He remembered pulling back, remembered the impact, remembered the world exploding into chaos and darkness. Now he's awake. Now he's alive. Now the clock is ticking. He pulls himself out of the crumpled cockpit. Every movement agony. His left leg won't bear weight. Looking down, he sees his shin bent at an angle that makes his stomach turn. Not a compound fracture, thank God, but bad enough. He can splint it, maybe, if he finds something rigid. The aircraft is a ruin, nose buried in soft earth, tail section twisted nearly perpendicular to the fuselage. Fuel is leaking, forming a dark pool beneath the wreckage. He needs to move away from it, needs to find cover, but first he needs to understand his situation. He checks his watch. It stopped during the crash. He estimates based on the sun's position, maybe 4 in the afternoon. Temperature dropping already. This far into enemy territory, he's at least 80 miles from friendly lines. On foot, injured, through hostile forest? Impossible. He can't walk more than a few hundred yards without collapsing. He can't call out. He can't signal. The onboard radio is completely destroyed. The main transceiver crushed beyond recognition. Standard procedure says hide and evade. Wait for search parties. But no one knows exactly where he went down. The flak damaged his navigation equipment before the crash. He could be 5 miles from where he was supposed to be, 10 miles, 20. And search parties won't cross this deep into enemy territory. Not for one pilot. Not when they don't know where to look. The cold reality settles over him like the gathering darkness. He has perhaps 12 hours before exposure becomes critical. Perhaps 24 before enemy patrols systematically search this sector. His only asset is the wreckage itself. His only hope is to scavenge something, anything that might save his life. Then the idea hits him with the force of revelation. The radio may be destroyed, but the components aren't all dead. Wiring, batteries, vacuum tubes, capacitors, resistors. If he could strip them out, if he could jury-rig something functional, if he could somehow create even the most basic transmitter. It's insane, it's desperate, it's impossible, but what else does he have? He drags himself back toward the wreckage, ignoring the screaming protest of his leg. The fuel smell is stronger now. He needs to work fast, work carefully, and pray the whole thing doesn't ignite while he's inside. He pulls himself into the mangled cockpit and begins to tear apart his aircraft with his bare hands and his flight knife. The instrument panel comes away in sections, screws stripped, metal bent back. Behind it, bundles of wiring run like veins through the structure. He cuts them free, careful to preserve as much length as possible. Red wires, black wires, green and yellow and white. He doesn't know yet what he'll need, so he takes everything. The emergency battery compartment is partially intact. He pries it open with the blade tip. 2 batteries inside, both battered but possibly functional. He tests them by touching wire leads together. A weak spark jumps. They're alive. Barely. The main radio unit is crushed flat, but beneath it he finds the backup transmitter coil. A beautiful spiral of copper wire around an iron core. It's bent but not broken. He pulls it free with trembling fingers. This is the heart of what he needs. Without this, nothing else matters. He finds 3 vacuum tubes that aren't shattered, their filaments still intact when he holds them to the fading light. A capacitor bank torn loose but still connected, resistors scattered like seeds across the cockpit floor. He gathers them into his flight jacket pockets, each piece a small miracle. But gathering parts is only the beginning. Now comes the impossible part, making them work. He drags his salvage away from the wreck, deeper into the trees to a small clearing where the ground is relatively dry. He uses a broken panel section as a workspace. His hands shake from pain and cold. Blood seeps through the makeshift bandage he tied around his leg. He tries to remember everything he learned in training, everything he learned as a kid taking apart radios in his father's workshop. A basic transmitter needs a power source, an oscillator circuit to generate a radio frequency signal, an amplifier to boost that signal, and an antenna to broadcast it. Simple in theory. In practice, with broken parts and no tools and the sun setting fast, it's nearly impossible. He starts with the oscillator. The transmitter coil becomes his frequency generator. He wires it in series with one of the vacuum tubes, using the battery as a power source. His cold fingers fumble with the tiny wire leads. He strips insulation with his teeth when the knife blade proves too clumsy. The connections are rough, twisted together and bent back on themselves for security. No solder, no proper terminals, just hope and copper. He works and the light fades. He works and his hands go numb. He works and the pain in his leg becomes a constant, throbbing presence that he learns to push into the background. The forest around him grows darker. Shadows deepen between trees. The temperature drops. His breath comes out in visible clouds. Somewhere in the distance he hears engines. Trucks maybe, motorcycles. The patrols are mobilizing.
They know something came down in this sector. They're searching. He has to work faster. But rushing means mistakes, and mistakes mean failure, and failure means death or capture. He forces himself to slow down, to think through each connection, to test each circuit before moving to the next stage. The vacuum tube needs a filament power source separate from the plate voltage. He creates a voltage divider using resistors, balancing the power distribution by trial and error. When he connects it, the vacuum tube filaments glow faint orange in the gathering darkness. It's working. It's actually working. The sight of that glow sends a surge of hope through him so powerful, it almost hurts.
But hope is fragile. As he works on the amplifier stage, one of his connections comes loose. The tube goes dark. He has to disassemble part of the circuit and start again. His fingers are so cold now he can barely feel the wires. He breathes on his hands, rubs them together, keeps working. The night is full dark now. He can't use a light, can't risk being seen. He works by touch and memory, feeling for the right components, testing connections with tiny sparks. The batteries are draining with every test. He needs to preserve power for the actual transmission attempt. But without testing, he won't know if the circuit works until it's too late. It's an impossible balance. He tests minimally, just enough to confirm basic function, then moves on. The antenna is the final challenge. A proper antenna needs to be a specific length for the frequency he's transmitting on. Too short and the signal won't propagate. Too long and it becomes inefficient. He doesn't have a measuring tape. He doesn't even know exactly what frequency his makeshift oscillator is generating. He estimates based on the coil dimensions and capacitor values, maybe somewhere in the low megahertz range. He needs an antenna perhaps 20 feet long. He strips more wire from the wreck, working by feel in total darkness, splicing sections together until he has enough length. He stretches it between two trees, as high as he can reach, using his parachute cords to secure it. The wire sways in the cold wind. He connects it to his circuit and prays it's enough. The radio is complete, or as complete as it can be, a Frankenstein's monster of aviation parts and desperate hope. He stares at it in the darkness, this impossible thing he's built. His hands are bloody. His leg is a column of fire. His body is shutting down from cold and shock. But the radio is done. Now comes the hardest part. Now comes the transmission. But first, he needs to survive the night. He can't transmit until dawn, when rescue aircraft might actually be flying. Transmitting now would only alert the enemy to his exact position. So he waits. And in the waiting, the forest becomes a different kind of enemy. The night is absolute. Cloud cover blocks the stars. He can't see his own hands in front of his face. The sounds of the forest surround him. Wind through branches, small animals moving through undergrowth. Once, the snap of a breaking stick that might be a footstep. He freezes, holds his breath, listens. Nothing follows, just his imagination turning every sound into a threat. The cold is worse than he expected. His flight jacket isn't enough. He considers making a fire but knows it would be suicide. Instead, he gathers pine needles and dead leaves, buries himself in them for insulation. It helps, but not enough. He shivers uncontrollably. His teeth chatter so hard his jaw aches. Sleep is impossible. The pain won't allow it. But exhaustion pulls at him anyway, trying to drag him under. He fights it. Falling asleep in this cold could mean never waking up. So he stays conscious through sheer force of will. And in the long, dark hours, his mind begins to fracture. Memories flood in unbidden. He sees his childhood workshop, his father's patient hands showing him how to wind a transformer coil. He sees his training squadron, young men laughing around a radio they'd repaired together. He sees the faces of his crew from previous missions, some of them gone now, lost to other flights, other crashes. He sees his mother's face when he left for the war. He sees his girl Anne, the photograph he carries in his jacket pocket, her smile frozen in black and white. He wonders if he'll ever see her again.
He wonders if she'll ever know what happened to him. The thoughts spiral darker. What if the radio doesn't work? What if no one hears him? What if he's just wasted hours on a fantasy while the enemy closes in? What if he's already dying and doesn't know it? The leg could be infected. The cold could be shutting down his organs. He could have internal injuries from the crash that will kill him slowly. He starts to spiral into panic, breath coming fast and shallow, heart racing. Then he forces himself to stop, to breathe, to think. Panic kills. He learned that in training. Fear is the mind killer. He repeats it like a mantra. Fear is the mind killer. He focuses on his breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, controlled. The panic recedes. He's still here, still alive, still fighting.
The hours crawl past like wounded things. He loses track of time. The night feels endless. His mind drifts between consciousness and something else, not quite sleep, but not quite awake. He hallucinates, briefly, seeing lights moving through the trees that aren't there, hearing voices that fade when he tries to focus on them. Once he's convinced he hears his father calling his name. He almost answers before he realizes it's just the wind. The isolation is crushing. He's never felt so alone. In the cockpit, even in combat, there was always the radio, voices of other pilots, the chatter of ground control. Here, there's nothing, just him and the darkness and the cold. He talks to himself sometimes, just to hear a human voice, tells himself stories, recites poetry he learned in school, anything to fill the silence. The night is a test of endurance that has nothing to do with physical survival and everything to do with not losing his mind. Then, finally, the darkness begins to thin. Not dawn yet, but pre-dawn, that deep blue hour when the world transitions from night to day. He can see shapes again, the trees, his hands, the makeshift radio lying beside him. He checks his leg. The swelling is worse. The pain is constant, but he's still alive. He made it through the night. Now comes the moment of truth. He positions himself beside the radio. His hands shake as he makes the final connections. The batteries are weak, but still functional. He powers on the circuit. The vacuum tubes warm slowly, filaments glowing in the dim light. The oscillator hums, almost inaudible. He touches the antenna connection and feels the tingle of RF energy. It's transmitting, or at least it's trying to. He has no way to know if the signal is strong enough to reach anyone. No way to know if he's even on a frequency anyone is monitoring. But he has to try. He clears his throat. His voice is raw from cold and dehydration. He keys the microphone he improvised from a speaker element, holding down the connection to transmit. His words come out broken, desperate. He gives his call sign, his last known position, his status. He repeats it, then again. The batteries are draining fast. He can see the filaments dimming. He has maybe one more transmission cycle before power dies completely. He keys the mic again, puts everything he has left into his voice, his location, his injuries, his plea for rescue. Then the tubes flicker and go dark. The batteries are dead. The transmission is over. He sits in silence, the dead radio in his lap, and waits for a response that doesn't come. Nothing. Just the sound of wind and his own breathing. No acknowledgement, no confirmation, no rescue. He's failed. He built the impossible machine, and it wasn't enough. The despair that crashes over him is total. He spent everything, every ounce of strength, every reserve of hope, every clever idea he had, and it wasn't enough. He lies back in the pine needles, stares up at the lightning sky, and feels himself letting go. Maybe this is how it ends. Maybe he gave it everything, and everything wasn't enough. The tears come then, hot and bitter. He doesn't fight them. He's too tired to fight anything anymore. But 80 miles away, in a military communication station, something is happening. A young radio operator, headphones clamped over his ears, is listening to the static-filled frequency bands used for emergency transmissions. He's tired. He's been on duty for 12 hours. His ears are ringing from constant white noise. He's about to switch to a different frequency when he hears something. Not words, not even clear signal, just a pattern in the static. A rhythm that sounds almost like human speech. He leans forward, adjusts the tuning, and asks his supervisor to come listen. The supervisor hears nothing but noise, tells him he's hearing things, tells him to move on. But the operator doesn't move on. Something about that pattern nags at him. He rewinds the tape they're recording on, plays it back. There, buried under layers of atmospheric interference and distance, he swears he hears call signs, American call signs. He marks the timestamp, triangulates the rough direction of origin based on signal strength. It's deep in enemy territory. Probably too deep. Probably nothing. But he reports it anyway. Sends it up the chain. One chance in 1,000 that it's real.
At the crash site, Brennan doesn't know any of this. He knows only that he's alone and dying. The sun is fully up now. The forest is coming alive with sound. Birds, insects, and somewhere, not far away, voices. Human voices speaking German. The patrols have found the general area. They're sweeping through the woods, calling to each other, coordinating their search. He tries to stand, can't. His leg buckles. He drags himself behind a fallen tree, pulling pine branches over his body for concealment. The voices get closer. He can hear boots crunching through underbrush, radio chatter. They're searching in a grid pattern, systematic, professional. It's only a matter of time before they find him. He thinks about his service pistol, 6 rounds. He could try to fight, could try to take some of them with him, but he knows how that ends. Better to be captured than killed. Better to survive even in a prison camp than die in a pointless firefight. He loosens the pistol in his holster but doesn't draw it. Not yet. The voices pass within 50 yards, then 100, then fade into the distance. They've moved past his position. He's been given a reprieve. But they'll circle back. They'll keep searching. He has maybe an hour, maybe less. Then he hears it. At first he thinks it's the enemy. The sound of engines. Aircraft engines? But the pitch is wrong. The rhythm is wrong. These are American engines. P-47 Thunderbolts, maybe, by the deep roar. They're flying a search pattern, low and slow, scanning the forest below. He wants to signal them but has nothing. No flare, no mirror, no smoke. He tries waving his arms but knows they'll never see him through the canopy. The aircraft pass overhead and continue on. The sound fades. They're leaving. He's missed them. The despair returns, even deeper than before. He was so close. So impossibly close. But close means nothing in survival. Close is just another way to die. Except one of the pilots saw something. Not Brennan, not directly, but something that didn't belong. A glint of metal in the trees, a shape that looked too regular. He banks his aircraft around, dropping lower and makes another pass. His wingman follows. They circle the area, trying to pinpoint whatever caught the first pilot's eye. Ground forces have been alerted. A rescue team is being scrambled, but they need an exact location. The pilot drops lower still, dangerously low, trees whipping past his wingtips. There. The wreckage of a P-51. Definitely American. Definitely recent. But where's the pilot? The forest is too dense to see anything on the ground. The pilot climbs back to altitude, marks the coordinates, and radios them to the incoming rescue team. Whether the pilot survived is unknown, but at least now they know where to look. The rescue team arrives by helicopter, a rare deployment this deep into contested territory. They're taking fire from enemy patrols before they even touch down. The door gunner lays down suppressing fire while troops jump out and fan into the trees. They're moving fast, searching desperately because the enemy is closing in, and they have maybe 5 minutes before this becomes a full-scale firefight. One soldier spots the wreckage, calls it out. They converge on the area, weapons up, scanning for threats and survivors. A sergeant nearly steps on Brennan, hidden under his pile of branches. The sergeant shouts, drops to his knees, starts clearing debris.
Other soldiers form a perimeter, firing toward enemy muzzle flashes in the trees. Brennan is barely conscious. The sergeant checks for vitals, finds them weak but present, and screams for a medic. They load him onto a stretcher at a dead run. Enemy fire is getting closer, rounds snapping through the branches above them. They reach the helicopter just as enemy troops break through the tree line. The door gunner empties his belt into the advancing soldiers, buying seconds. The helicopter lifts off, with rounds punching through its thin skin. One soldier is hit, wounded but alive. The pilot pushes the throttle to the stops, and they climb hard and fast, leaving the firefight behind. Brennan wakes briefly during the flight, sees the medic working on his leg, sees the faces of the soldiers around him, sees one of them holding his makeshift radio, the fragile collection of parts that somehow, impossibly saved his life. He wants to tell them something, wants to explain, but the words won't come. Exhaustion and morphine pull him under. He sleeps for the first time in 2 days and dreams of nothing.
He wakes in a field hospital, clean sheets, bright lights, pain, but manageable pain, filtered through medication. A doctor tells him his leg will heal, no permanent damage. He's lucky. So impossibly lucky. They tell him about the transmission, how it almost didn't reach them, how the operator almost missed it, how the rescue almost didn't happen, how enemy forces reached his location less than 3 minutes after the helicopter pulled out. 3 minutes. That's the margin he survived by. 3 minutes between rescue and capture. 3 minutes between life and a prison camp, or worse. It doesn't feel real. None of it feels real. Later, much later, they bring him his makeshift radio. A team of engineers has studied it, fascinated by what he accomplished with so little. The circuit design, crude but effective. The improvised components. The sheer audacity of attempting something so unlikely to work. They tell him the signal was weak, barely detectable, degraded by distance and interference. But it was there. Just strong enough. Just clear enough. Just lucky enough. They ask permission to include his design in survival training manuals, to teach other pilots that even in the most desperate situations, ingenuity can mean the difference between death and survival. He agrees, though he doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like someone who got impossibly lucky, who made 1,000 decisions that could each have ended differently, who survived not through skill alone, but through some combination of skill and chance and timing that he'll never fully understand. His girl, Anne, visits him when he's transferred stateside. She cries when she sees him, holds him like she'll never let go. He tells her the story in pieces, over days and weeks. She listens to every word. She saves the newspaper clippings when the story goes public, when reporters call him the miracle pilot, the engineer who wouldn't quit. He doesn't read them, doesn't need to. He knows what happened, knows what it cost, knows how close he came to never seeing her again, never seeing anyone again. The nightmares come later. The waking in darkness convinced he's still in the forest. The panic at the sound of German voices in films. The survivor's guilt over the crew members from other missions who didn't make it home. But he's alive. Broken in some ways, healing in others, but alive. The radio sits in a museum now, behind glass. A small placard explains what it is, what it did, what it represents. Visitors look at it and see a collection of old parts, wire and tubes and batteries corroded with age. They don't see the blood on the connections where his fingers bled making them. Don't see the desperation. Don't see the impossible hope. But sometimes, late at night when the museum is closed, if you could stand in that darkness and listen, maybe you'd hear something. The ghost of a transmission, a voice calling out across time and distance and death itself, a voice that refused to be silenced. From twisted metal, pain, and silence, he built one thing the war almost took from him. Not just a radio, not just a rescue. He built hope. And hope it turns out, is the strongest frequency. It cuts through static and distance and fear. It reaches across impossible odds. It refuses to die. And sometimes, just sometimes, it brings us home.